I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 203 of the Brilliant Balance podcast, my interview with Dr. Funke Brown, Breathe Easier and Sleep Better. I am so delighted to introduce to you today my new friend, Dr. Brown. She is an incredible voice in the world of sleep medicine. She is an academic physician. Currently, she's an assistant professor of clinical pediatrics at the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania, which is part of the University of Pennsylvania health system. And she actually, you'll hear her say, started her career in pediatric pulmonary medicine and then pediatric sleep disorders. She is a double board certified pediatric respiratory sleep medicine physician. I don't want to leave one word of that out for her. And she is just a really gifted communicator who is breaking down this important but sometimes complex world of sleep for all of us in this episode. I actually met Dr. Brown through Brilliant Balance. And as we were talking one day on the phone, I said, you really need to be on the podcast. Your area of expertise is so valuable to this community, both for ourselves as adult women, often moms who deprioritize sleep in the name of all the other things that we want to be doing and spending our time on, and also as parents who are trying to instill good sleep habits in our children, whether they are young children, babies and toddlers, whether they're school-age children or teens and adolescents. Like throughout that entire journey to adulthood, sleep has different challenges. It carries different stigma or different resistance. Who has a teenager that actually wants to sleep? And our children notoriously fight it, right? They want to do anything but go to bed at night or take a nap. And so I was really anxious to get her ideas into your hands in terms of what are some of the biggest challenges that we create for ourselves when we don't have enough sleep at any age. Why are we so resistant to sleep was a question that I wanted us to talk through. How much sleep do we need at different ages? What do we do about napping? That's a question that we dig into in this episode. Is it a helpful tool? Is it maybe not so helpful? And I just think in this interview, Dr. Brown does such a great job of balancing the science, and you'll hear her reference it throughout the episode, with really practical tips for us as individuals and as parents. So I hope you enjoy this. She's going to share with you that she has a side passion for writing. She really believes in the power of story to inspire people to live their best lives. And so we'll share with you where you can find her website in addition to her Instagram account where she shares ideas on sleep medicine. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dr. Funke Brown. So Dr. Brown, thank you so much for agreeing to be with us today. I love how we met. I love our little backstory, and I'm just so excited that the day is here that we're having you on the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Sherilyn.
Well, one thing I've started doing with our guests that gives everyone a bit of a peek behind the curtain is tell us what your day looks like today. What's on your schedule? What's on the docket?
Sure. So I realized I had some time. Usually I have Mondays off, but I have the day off today. So I took full advantage of it. I got my car, I needed an oil change. So I dropped that off. And then my kids had tennis. They have tennis camp. So I just went up to drop them off at tennis camp. And then I went to the post office. And then because I have a shorter week this week, I kind of got started on a few emails from work just to make sure I wasn't drowning in emails tomorrow. And now I'm here.
Yes. Awesome. So your kids are still off for the summer as we're recording this. And then
Yes.
What will you do this evening with them?
So we'll pick them up from camp. We'll have dinner. Usually we just kind of hang out. Their camp runs till about 4 p.m. So usually we'll have dinner, hang out, and That's pretty much it. We do have a trip coming up at the next week where we'll be doing a road trip to the Outer Banks. So excited about that. So we'll probably throw in some packing as well.
Yes.
So kind of laid back.
One thing I love about that little brief segment with every guest we do it with is it's kind of like the stars. They're just like us, and Us Weekly, that you do start to realize that people with these very high-paced, prestigious careers have lives that look very similar to everyone listening today. So I'm sure you can find yourself in Dr. Brown's story of the oil change and the hanging out in the evening. And that's kind of the point in doing it, is it's so relatable that in between that, we squeeze our work, right? We insert our purpose, our calling into the midst of a day that, looks like everybody else's on the outside. I love that. So how did you find your way to sleep medicine? And did you always want to be a doctor, I guess, is my first question.
Yeah. So really, honestly, I think going back to when I was so little, I was very sickly as a child. So I was in the doctor's office frequently getting shots and things like that. And one of my pediatricians, who happened to also be a friend of my parents, just really blew me away with his empathy, his patience, and really working with my parents who were really scared and things like that. So I got that seed planted pretty early. And by the time I was ready to make a decision on what I wanted to do, it kind of came very easily. In terms of pediatrics, these kids are so resilient. I think, and also because of my story, I just knew I really wanted to help kids. And also because I know that as I'm helping the kids, I'm also helping the parents, right? They're the ones that advocate for their children. And so that's how I kind of evolved into medicine and pediatrics. And then later, after I did my pediatric pulmonary fellowship after doing a residency in pediatrics. And, I was taking care of children that had a lot of breathing disorders, really complex breathing disorders. It's a very interesting story. There's a disorder called CCHS, or Undine's curse. You may have heard of that before, but essentially what happens with these children is as they fall asleep, they cannot breathe. They literally stop breathing and they need to be on a ventilator. And so the very first patient I had who had that, it just was just really so sad. And that really started getting me interested in, wait, what's going on in their sleep, And so I then decided to go ahead and get another fellowship in sleep medicine, just really to understand sleep-related breathing disorders.
Yes.
And that just pretty much opened up a whole different world for me in sleep. I went in and I thought, okay, I'm just going to help kids sleep better and breathe better. And then you realize the impact of sleep on our entire lives. And so that's been pretty much the story.
It's so fascinating. I love how those breadcrumbs and clues sort of, if we pay attention, they lead us straight to our calling, our greatest work. So you said you realized how sleep sort of underpins so many things. Let's talk about sleep. From your perspective, what are the problems that we create for ourselves when we don't get enough sleep? Like, why is it so fundamentally important?
Yeah, that's really the key, actually. Sleep is a critical pillar of health. This is what I tell people. As important as it is to eat healthy and exercise, so is sleep. And sleep actually impacts all aspects of our lives, starting from just clearance of waste products. So it turns out that as you are awake during the day, you start to build up products in your brain that gets kind of cleaned out with sleep. Some diseases have actually been associated with lack of sleep, because what then happens is those products, one of them is beta amyloid. Okay. And that's really one of the deposits that's been found in patients who have like Alzheimer's and things like that. So you get that work done only when you're sleeping. So in addition to that, a lot of evidence in the literature about cardiovascular outcomes. So there's been studies that are showing that insufficient sleep is connected to increased risk of heart rate, high blood pressure, strokes as well.
Yes.
On top of that, even your immune system gets revved up or gets, rejuvenated with sleep. There's different stages of sleep. So there's the non-REM sleep. And in that non-REM sleep, that's where you really get your deep restorative sleep. And during that time, your immune system is essentially repairing itself. So your ability to fight infections, if you're not really getting enough sleep, is connected to sleep as well.
It diminished, yeah.
Yeah. So think about when you have a cold or if you don't get sleep, you feel more sick. So it's starting from there.
Yes.
Now we even have some studies that are showing that some cancers, because the natural killer cells which your body produces really gets repaired when you sleep. So there's been some associations with that as well. And then our mood, right? Our mood is impacted. We see
Amen.
that right away. from one day of not sleeping, you already feel it. So talk about not doing it for a long time. And as busy women, as parents, you can tell my kids know it when I've not had good enough sleep,
Oh, yeah. For sure. And we see it in them as well, right? We see how hard it is to regulate your whole system when it's not rested. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Emotion balance. I mean, anxiety, depression, a lot of that. The ability to make high quality decisions is actually also connected with sleep as well. So impulsivity is related to lack of sleep. So you tend to be a little bit more impulsive and things like that. So mood, physical and mental health, immune regulation, all that is affected when we don't get enough sleep.
I mean, it's like a wonder drug. When you listen to this litany, and I bet you could go on and on with, layers and layers. If you kind of ask yourself as a listener, if you could do one thing that, by the way, is totally free and get all of those benefits, why would we not do that? And yet we fight it, right? We fight it as adults. Our kids fight it because we're so addicted to the things we can do while we're awake. We sort of give short shrift to the benefits of this sort of like powerful mechanism that's happening without any effort of our own while we're asleep. That fascinates me, the resistance that we have to sleep. And so I'd love to hear, why is that? And maybe we take this one by age group, because you have such deep expertise with children and adolescents. And a lot of our listeners will be adult women. So maybe let's just take them one at a time. What is the biggest sleep resistance or issue or challenge that you see with children, let's say pre-adolescent children? What do they struggle with?
I think really sometimes a lot of it is exactly what you call it, bedtime resistance. They just want to go on and they're so wired. And so a lot of this is related also to limit setting, things that may be happening during the day that kind of feeds into the night as well. They want to stay on their devices, but I'm not sleepy. I'm scared. There's a monster under my bed. Can you sleep with me? Can I have a sip of water? The list goes on and on and on. And they just will keep pushing until they get a yes, because you have an exasperated, exhausted mom who is like, you know what? Just come into my bed. I don't care. Just like whatever we need to do. So I see a lot of that with younger kids. With our adolescents, it's the screen time. But in addition to that, it's things that are sort of not necessarily within their control to some degree. When you think about the early school start times in our teenagers, I mean, some of these kids are starting, they have to get out of bed by like 6 a.m. And if you think about it, because adolescents, the circadian rhythm, which is their body clock, is shifted naturally. So their bodies actually prefer a later bedtime. And ideally, they should be sleeping in a little bit. So we're sort of, with the school start times and things, we're sort of shortchanging them on both ends.
Yes.
And so I always compare an adolescent that has to get up at about 6:30 for school that starts at 7:30. To us as parents, if suddenly somebody says, get up at 4 a.m. and make this really high critical decision,
Right. And go nail, honors like anatomy or whatever, first thing in the morning. Yeah.
Exactly. So for them, and then there's the homework, right? There's the extracurricular activity. So all those things kind of squeeze out time that we would have for sleep. So those are some things that I really see
happening.
Yeah.
It always makes me wonder, and we'll move to adult women in a second, but I feel like there might be a theme across all three of these, which is sort of FOMO. Like there's more we want to do. And because maybe the benefits of sleep are a little more invisible, right? They don't feel very fun. You're not really even conscious of them, that there's nothing to sort of look forward to unless we've really anchored into those benefits, which I'm not sure kids are even cognitively capable of doing. So there's this kind of cost benefit misalignment for them. So many benefits to staying awake, fun and social time and independence. And like, what's the benefit of sleep? How do we reconcile that? How do you work with children to understand the benefits?
I really try to just encourage parents to engage them as much as possible in the process. When I was growing up, I had zero understanding of what sleep did. It was just almost like punishment, like you said, like, you're really kidding me right now? I have to leave this like amazing thing I'm doing to sleep. Or it was used almost as a punishment, like, go to your room, go to bed. You're like cranky, just go. And so, there's that association already. And so really reframing it for them and having them involved, at least the older kids, having them involved in that process. So for me, I think about, it depends on the type of child. So you have some, I would say, older kids that are like go-getters. They want to do it right. They want to accomplish so much. And so I usually will tell the story of, guess what? If you sleep well, it helps your memory. It can help you get great grades. So they kind of like, oh, okay, I guess I'll try.
I'm smiling because that is exactly what my mom did for me. When I was in high school, that's what I cared about, would have been my grades and performance. And the one factoid she gave me was that you pull things into your long-term memory when you sleep. So if you've been studying and you think you're going to pull this all-nighter or stay up late, and then you don't have a good night of sleep, that information never made it. She could have been wrong, right? But that was so powerful to me because I wanted access to it.
She was so right. And that research has shown that. That's incredible. Yeah. It is so right in terms of just really moving information from your short-term to your long-term memory. Yes. It happens during sleep.
Right. And then it's accessible to you. So you go to take that test and you're like, oh, there it is, versus the all-nighter kind of dynamic where it's never had a chance to do that. And moreover, you're foggy and you can't think straight. So I'm hearing you say, find the motivation that may be valuable to that child, that teen, to get through to them. How about adult women? Why do we resist it?
I think it's a FOMO. It's our to-do list. It's the pressure we put on ourselves. It's those last few emails. It's not really being able to prioritize it. We kind of get a sense because we've seen what we feel like when we don't get enough sleep. So there's a mismatch between what our needs are and what we feel we have time to do. And so I think a lot of that is, all these demands really taking up the space that sleep should occupy. I think that's really the thing that disrupts us as women.
Which the cool thing about that, if I listen as a problem solver, is we're fully in control of that, right? We could make a different choice if we anchored into those benefits and sort of learned where we have to set limiters on our day. Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. I wonder, though, what are the out of our control issues or challenges that you see? I hear women talk about, I go to bed, but I can't fall asleep. Or I wake up in the middle of the night. I have this interrupted sleep, not because a baby woke me up, but because I just wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. and my mind is racing. What are some of the things you hear?
Yeah. So anxiety is at an all-time high, and that impacts sleep significantly. And usually this is something that I tell people, like when you look at sleep, of course, we want to get the number of required hours of sleep as much as possible. But apart from the quantity of sleep we want to get, we really should also focus on the quality as well as the continuity of sleep.
Yes.
And so really there's some potential things that disrupt our sleep. If our minds are constantly racing, that's a huge one, because even though we have this really nice sleep hygiene, but your mind can't just shut down. That's really common. And then sometimes there's some underlying medical disorders as well that can disrupt our sleep as well. And then one common thing I would say is caffeine. Caffeine and alcohol are huge. That nightcap turns out not that great. It helps you, it may help you fall asleep, but then it shortchanges your deep sleep, which is really where you get that restoration. And so as women, that's something that I often see or hear that we experience and things like that.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's gratifying because we do a program called 30 Days to Vibrant Energy. And that's probably the least popular thing I say in that program is, man, that evening alcoholic drink sounds so tempting. But if you're wondering why you're waking up at 2 or 3, check that first.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the women who come back and say, I can't believe it. I slept through the night for the first time, in a year. So that's a hot tip for if you're listening today. Let's talk about quantity. You said quantity first, and then we sort of talk about quality. How much sleep? What are the guidelines for, say, and I'm sure this varies in micro increments, but maybe by children, adolescents, and adults?
So it ranges. The National Sleep Foundation has recommendations for sleep, which is right on their website. For infants, for instance, sleep anywhere from 14 to 17 hours of sleep, including naps and things like that. Mm-hmm. Usually, I would say for school-age children, for toddlers, you're talking about 11 to 13. For school-age kids, it's about 9 to 11 hours of sleep. For teenagers, is usually about 8 to 10 hours. And then for adults, anywhere from 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So it's a kind of like a wide range. Mm-hmm. And so really finding the happy spot. There's no perfect number. That's why there's a range. And everyone is different. You have some people who are more of long sleepers and just need that like full 9 hours, for example, as adults, while some people can get away with about 7.
Yes. And, all of us have been to the pediatrician with our children and been asked that question of how many hours of sleep are they getting? And I think you mentioned that not only getting the quantity, but if ideally continuous sleep. So I would love to hear a little bit about napping for adults, moms with interrupted nights or teenagers. Is there power? Can napping help close the gap if we come up short or not?
Not fully. Ideally, we should try to get as much sleep during the night as possible, but the naps are extremely helpful, especially if you feel that fatigue. The important thing, though, that I am a big fan of naps. That's part of my self-care. But you have to determine who you are and your child as well. So if you're already having difficulty falling asleep at night, then you really don't want to take a nap.
I see.
So the way our sleep system works, there are 2 processes. There's what you call the homeostatic process, which is essentially you building up sleep pressure from when you wake up. So it's almost like or like a pressure cooker. You start to mount that pressure over the course of the day. And at nighttime, you really feel very sleepy. So when you do take a nap, you're decreasing that pressure a bit.
I see.
So if you already have issues with falling asleep at night, then you don't want to decrease that pressure too much.
Fascinating.
If that's not the case, naps are really helpful. I would though recommend not going over like 30 minutes of nap because you start to get that sleep inertia, right? I'm sure you may have experienced it.
And you don't want to wake up, right?
You just don't, or you wake up and you're even more exhausted than you fell asleep. So really limiting it to about 20 to 30 minutes, sometime in the middle of the day, say about like 1 p.m., not too late as well, so that you can still have time to build enough pressure. For our teenagers, especially since so many of them are sleep deprived, a quick nap is also helpful. Again, nothing more than like 20 minutes or so, just to help up a little bit.
Just minutes,
that's really important. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It is fascinating how countercultural it is to get enough sleep. I mean, you do as a teen or an adult have a sense that you're missing out on things that I've kind of always been an early to bed, early to rise person. It just fits for me. But I'm very aware that, the impact it has on your social life or just being, people who get to watch TV at night and are always up to date on the latest shows. Like that's the trade-off I think it's worth it, but I think I understand that you have to sort of have some tolerance for what you're giving up. Yeah. Interesting. Did I cut you off on that one? I want to make sure we get a thorough answer. So you said there was that sleep.
Oh, yeah. So with the sleep pressure, yes. That's just the sleep pressure. The other piece is the circadian rhythm, which is just your body clock. And so that really has this ebbs and flows over the course of the day. And then at night, when your melatonin is secreted, that's when you really start to feel very, very sleepy. So those two processes kind of work hand in hand to help you with sleep.
Yes, got it. And so that I'm wondering, like, if we were going to formulate a way to talk with our kids or our teens about getting more sleep, what can they understand? What's the level, like, what's going to avoid the eye roll, but actually get through to them? Because I want to give the people listening some real help, like practicalities of how do you have this conversation to get a better outcome?
Well, I think telling them about the sleep pressure analogy, I think is important, especially for some of our teens that want to be awake all night and then try to sleep all day. And so they now have their clocks kind of flipped backwards, and really helping them to understand, yes, you don't feel sleepy, one, because your circadian clock is delayed a little bit. So melatonin, which is your sleep hormone, is secreted naturally a little bit later. But then if you're combining that with devices, that suppresses the melatonin production and things like that. So talking to them on that level, sort of a little bit of the physiology behind it is helpful. And I think more importantly is what the benefits we have. So one of the things I also love to talk to kids about, especially if they're like, oh yeah, whatever, I don't care about my grades right now, so is, okay, what do you like? Video games, basketball? What do you like to do? And connect with them on that, because your response time improves when you sleep. So you can kind of connect. You see the like of you saying I can be a better video game player. Yes. Oh yes, you can.
That's so great. Yes. I think the sleep pressure is a really interesting concept that I bet even young kids can get, sort of how it builds over the day. And it's also why, again, my mom apparently was a genius in this. I remember her saying before the school year would start, she would start waking me up earlier. Instead of fighting about bedtime, it was like, you're going to get up at this time. Well, what does that do? It probably naturally increases sleep pressure. So you would then have an earlier bedtime and you can kind of reset that cycle. Your head nodding for people who can't see you. So I think it may be interesting for us as parents. And again, we're recording this as the school year starts. If you're really struggling in these early weeks and months, to think about the power that early wake up time, even on the weekends, might hold to really keep that rhythm more in place. That's a good tip.
Absolutely. I love that. That is exactly the point. That's the easiest thing to adjust, actually. I mean, of course, it's hard for them because they don't want to get out of bed. Right. But if you want to help reset their clock, that circadian clock, the best thing to focus on, instead of trying to do power struggles both at bedtime and at wake up time, is just focus on their rise time. For teens or for older kids and even younger children, you slowly start to move that back, especially with the summer, if they've been sleeping in for a while. Just set that time to be closer to when they would naturally wake up when school starts. I recommend exposing them to as much bright light in the morning as possible, because what that does is it instantly drops the melatonin production and really gets them more alert. So even if they're like, oh, please, they want to pull the sheets over their head.
You're like, you're in there with a flashlight.
Exactly. Open the blinds and wake them up early. That is great. Try to avoid the naps during the day because they're not going to take naps in school, right? So let's try to eliminate that and help them build that pressure. And then slowly you can get them to, you can get to work with them to find a bedtime that's actually appropriate to make sure they're getting the right number.
Getting the right number. Yeah, it's a gentler, maybe more natural approach versus forcing that bedtime. Yeah. So I want to get us close to wrap here, but I would love to hear just a couple of your best ideas for getting more high quality sleep. Like, is it temperature? Is it dark? Like, what are some of the things that really work if we want to improve the amount or the quality of our sleep?
Absolutely. So consistency, it turns out it is very critical, so that, again, your circadian rhythm is set that way. So a consistent bedtime and a consistent wake time. And I always tell people that sleep is not like a bank. You can't sleep deprive yourself during the week and try to overdraw on the weekend. It just doesn't work. So really maintaining a consistent sleep time and wake time, even on the weekends. On the weekends, you could go over maybe like an hour, not more than 2 hours. So I think that really will give you the biggest bang for your buck. And then another thing I feel that's really important is the environment. And so with the environment, making sure that it is cool, it is dark, and it is noise free. The reason why cool helps is because at nighttime, our core body temperature actually drops as the melatonin is rising. So if you take a nice warm shower before bed, it actually helps your body temperature, your core body temperature cool down faster, and then make sure your room temperature is nice and cool. If you're noticing you're tossing and turning in bed and you're not able to fall asleep, check the environment. Are you do you have too many blankets on? Is the temperature right? That's really helpful. And I talk about environment, but in that I also include, the lights, right? So dark, meaning dark from devices as well, because again, the melatonin, usually I'll say two things that devices do is it suppresses your melatonin production because then your brain thinks it's still daytime. And then the interruptions and the notifications, it just creates this arousal in you where you're like, okay, I got to do this. Let me send this email real quick. Or what am I going to do tomorrow? Or how do I respond? Or that post that just totally aggravated you. And now you're
right.
just like,
it's relatable.
So yes. And then the last thing that I would say is along the lines of assigning bed for sleep and sleeping only in bed. I think that's important because sometimes we turn the bedroom into our movie theater, our dining room, our place of worry and anxiety, So really we want to make the connections where you get to bed and you sleep. So what I would say for us as women, if you find out that your mind is racing at bedtime, you're not able to sleep, you feel like your heart is like thumping, you're not likely to get to sleep. So if you've been in bed for about 20, 30 minutes and you're not able to fall asleep, because we want to break the association between the bed and worry, just get out of bed, maybe sit in a chair and either meditate, do some deep breathing, something of that sort, just to really break that association. And once you start to get sleepy again, get back into bed.
That makes sense.
That's really helpful.
So sort of worry elsewhere. Get out of bed if you're worrying, take it to another location that's not associated with sleep, get the worries out, and then come back to, that's an interesting, great tip.
Yeah.
Great tip. I love these. And I feel like we could go on all day. I mean, this is your whole career. I'm sure we could just keep giving people ideas. I do want our listeners to know where to find you online. What's the best place to find you and your work?
Absolutely. So right now I'm relatively active on social media. It's at Restful Sleep MD. So there I really do share tips for sleep for the family, for kids, for women particularly. So that's Restful Sleep MD. I also have a website that's radiatebrilliance.com. And so there I share inspiring stories, experiences just to help women be better versions of themselves. I also do have there where I share sleep tips as well. My website, the Restful Sleep MD website, is in production. And so if you follow me on Restful Sleep MD, you'll know right when I launch the website. So
Perfect. So Restful Sleep MD is the social handle on Insta. That's going to be the best place to find you. All right, let's do our speed round. These are 5 fun questions that we close with. You ready?
Sure.
All right. First up, what makes you feel brilliant?
I feel brilliant when I've helped a family troubleshoot and figure out how best to navigate their sleep issues. I think I've had families come in just disrupt with sleep, and it ends up being that just making or talking them through some certain things completely transforms their life. When I do that, I feel brilliant.
Awesome. What's your favorite time-saving hack?
My favorite time-saving hack, I would say, is my Evernote, where I put all my things to do, and also delegating. I'm learning real quick to delegate. So as soon as I see something, is this something I need to do, or can someone else do it? If I can figure out that someone else could do it, I'm delegating. That's been so liberating.
What have you learned to say no to?
Well, recently with the pandemic, I've learned to say no to Zoom meetings where I either don't add any, but feel like I add value or have any value to get from it. So, yep. They show up on my calendar and I'm learning to say no.
What's one dream that you're chasing these days?
One of the dreams is always talked about here today, which is really dissipating knowledge of sleep, how to prioritize sleep to larger audiences, to families, and to empower them to understand why and how they could get better sleep for them and their children.
Okay, fun one. What's the song that you turn on when you need to get in the zone?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say Brown Skin Girl by Beyonce gets me there.
Love it. Love it. We're going to do a playlist of all these songs eventually because there's such great recos in getting in the zone. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with me today and for sharing all of this wisdom about sleep with our listeners. I know that everybody listening got something practical that they can take away and apply to their own lives. So I'm so grateful for your time and your expertise and your energy. It was just exceptional.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Cheryl. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this really great conversation. I loved having the chance to ask her these questions directly and get them straight into your hands. I think we all learned my mom is a genius, apparently, when it comes to sleep and the advice that she gave me and the same advice I'm passing on to my children. So I hope you are taking something away from this episode that you can apply in your life, in your household, that will help everyone who lives with you breathe easier and sleep better. That is all for today, my friends. If you are new to this community, please come follow along in the Brilliant Balance Facebook group. That's a great place to start and get connected to the community. You can also find us on Instagram at brilliant_balance, or you can find me at C. Skolnicki. That's all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.